What if I told you that the man we call Jesus never came to start a religion, but to dismantle one? That his real war wasn't against sin, but against the very system that claimed to speak for God. Imagine a rebel, cloaked not in armor, but in divine wisdom, walking into temples not to worship, but to expose. Imagine a man whose every word was a code, not for blind obedience, but for inner liberation. This is the story of a cosmic insurgent, a spiritual revolutionary. Not the passive, sanitized version you've been handed, but the real Jesus, and the war he waged against religion itself. Stay with me. What you're about to hear has been hidden for nearly 2,000 years. The religious system Jesus was born into, long before Jesus ever turned over the tables in the temple, religion had already become a machine, not a vessel for divine wisdom, but a rigid hierarchy of power, profit, and fear. By the time of the 1st century, the temple in Jerusalem wasn't just a place of worship. It was the center of an empire within an empire, a religious bureaucracy locked in collaboration with Rome. The very force that occupied and oppressed the people of Judea. The Pharisees, keepers of the law, clung to literal interpretations and outward rituals. The Sadducees, wealthy and aristocratic, controlled the temple economy and denied the mystical altogether. And both groups stood at the top of a system built on separation, exclusion, and fear of God. But then he arrived, not with a sword, but with a truth so piercing it threatened the foundation of the entire structure. Jesus didn't come to build an altar, he came to tear down the veil. He didn't dress like a priest. He wandered barefoot among fishermen, tax collectors, lepers, and women, people the religious elite had cast out as unworthy. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites," he declared, "for you are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but full of dead men's bones within." Matthew 23:27. These weren't the words of a gentle preacher. They were the cries of a rebel mystic, awakening humanity from spiritual hypnosis. What they never told you in church. He taught in parables, not to confuse, but to conceal sacred truths from those who would misuse them. His message wasn't about following rules. It was about transcending them. It was about union with the divine, not dependence on priests or temples. And that message was dangerous. It's no wonder the religious elite conspired to silence him. As author and theologian John Dominic Crossan once said, "Jesus did not die for the sins of the world. He died because he challenged the powers that ruled it." The real teachings of Jesus, the inner kingdom they never wanted you to find. They called him rabbi, but he broke the rules of every rabbi before him. He healed on the Sabbath. He spoke to women publicly. He forgave without sacrifice. And he taught that the kingdom of God was not in a temple, not in a book, not in a ritual, but within you. The kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21. These are not just poetic words. They are a spiritual technology, a map to awakening. What was Jesus really teaching? He wasn't offering religion. He was offering remembrance. Remembrance that you are not separate from God, that the divine spark lives in your breath, in your blood, in your being. He said, "I and the Father are one," John 10:30, not because he was the only one, but because he had realized what we all have forgotten, And yet, religion turned his message into a monument rather than a mirror. They told us to worship Jesus when he came to awaken the Christ within us. In the Gospel of Thomas, one of the lost, mystical texts not included in the Bible, Jesus says, "He who drinks from my mouth will become as I am. I myself shall become he, and the things that are hidden will be revealed to him." Thomas Logian 108. This is not religion. This is transformation. This is inner alchemy, the process of turning the lead of ego into the gold of divine consciousness. It was never about building churches. It was about building your light body. It was never about guilt and punishment. It was about awakening, integration, ascension. And this is why religion had to rewrite the script, because a liberated soul cannot be controlled. And a humanity that remembers its divinity doesn't need a middleman. The hijack, how religion replaced revelation. From mystical awakening to institutional control. After Jesus left this world, a question echoed across generations. Who gets to interpret his message? The mystics said, "Go within." The institutions said, "Come to us." And thus began the great hijack. The council that changed everything. In the year 325 CE, Emperor Constantine, a Roman warlord who had only recently converted to Christianity, called the Council of Nicaea. It wasn't a spiritual gathering. It was a political maneuver. The goal? To consolidate power, unify the empire, and turn a spiritual movement into a state religion. At that council, and others like it, books were banned, doctrines were forged, and the mystical was scrubbed from the record. The Gospel of Mary? Gone. The Gospel of Thomas? Buried. The Essene teachings of light, energy, and inner initiation labeled heresy. Instead of self-realization, they gave us original sin. Instead of "you are the light of the world," they told us we were broken, fallen, damned. And the Christ, once a universal archetype of awakened consciousness, was reduced to a figure you could only worship, not emulate. As author Elaine Pagels writes in the Gnostic Gospels, the Church chose to silence those who offered a radically different understanding of Jesus' message, one rooted in knowledge, not blind faith. The shift from inner fire to outer authority. The early followers of Jesus, many of whom practiced meditation, fasting, sacred geometry, dream interpretation, and communion with divine light, were slowly replaced by bureaucrats in robes. Temples were built, hierarchies established, rules multiplied. And the living flame of Christ's message was sealed beneath centuries of ritual, control, and fear. They replaced mystery with dogma. They replaced initiation with indoctrination. But the original fire still burns, in apocryphal texts, in ancient symbols, in dreams, and maybe in you. The Awakening, rediscovering the inner Christ. This isn't a story, it's a mirror. You've heard the story, but now you must decide what it means for you. Because the war Jesus waged against religion wasn't just against an institution. It was against every voice inside you that says you are separate from God. And that war is still being fought. Every time you silence your intuition to follow a rule, every time you choose fear over love, shame over truth, every time you kneel before an outer authority, forgetting the divine lives within you, you reenact the crucifixion, not of Jesus, but of your own inner Christ. What is the inner Christ? The Christ is not Jesus's last name. It is a state of being, a frequency of awakened, divine human consciousness. It is what you become when the false self dies and the light within is resurrected. When Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me," Matthew 16:24, he wasn't calling you to suffer. He was calling you to transform, to let the ego fall away, to rise in your own Christed nature, to remember what you are: a temple of light, a child of the cosmos, a fragment of the infinite. Practices to awaken the Christ within. This isn't philosophy. It's a daily practice of remembrance. Here are 3 ways to begin reclaiming the lost teachings. Go within daily. Meditate in silence, not to empty the mind, but to listen to the still small voice. Just 10 minutes a day with the intention to connect to your divine self will begin to shift your entire life. Read the mystical Gospels. Go beyond the canon. Explore the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, and Essen texts. These were meant for those ready to know, not just believe. Speak as the Christ would. Before reacting, pause. Ask, is this fear or love? Control or liberation? Separation or oneness? The Christ within always leads you back to wholeness. They told you Jesus came to save you, but the truth is, he came to awaken you. And now, it's your turn to complete the revolution he began, not by building altars, but by becoming one. You will do even greater things than I, he said. John 14:12. Not in temples, not in books, in you. Welcome back to the war they never told you about. And this time, you are the light. If this message stirred something ancient within you, if it felt more like remembrance than information, then you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to unlock more forgotten wisdom, hidden gospels, and sacred truths that religion left behind. Like this video to keep the flame burning. Share it with a seeker, someone you know is ready to remember. This is not just a channel, it's a sanctuary for the soul. Until next time, stay awake, stay sovereign, stay divine.